Well, let's take a little deeper dive on selenosis now.
Okay.
Selenosis is the technical term used for a disease that's created by over accumulation of selenium in the body. And as we've heard from Ellen, it can come from plants. It can come from over supplementing the diet with even a manufactured diet could have it wrong. And when we first learned about it in veterinary school, it was always about sheep and cows. They had a disease called blind staggers. And they'd find this sheep out in the middle of a field with his head pressed up against a tree. And that was selenium toxicosis, but they called it alkali disease.
Alkali disease.
And that's because the plants on the soil were very alkaline, which grabbed the selenium out of the soil, even though the soil was very high on its own. It took a certain kind of plant, and the sheep loved that particular plant. I can't remember which one it was. And they got the first signs that I'd ever heard of it, and that was skin problems and sloughing of the hooves.
Oops. Yep.
And that, I can't imagine that. Joint pain, joint erosion, lamenesses. And then we started seeing reports on other animals like ducks and kestrels. They became emaciated and die. The only way they really diagnosed it was in histopath. We've heard the story from Ellen on the cranes. And other mammals have started showing diarrhea. Humans, for example, get garlic breath when they have selenosis. Their fingernails become brittle. Their hair may fall out. Irritability, again, is a common thing. And so when we looked at Brazil nuts as a possible problem in birds, it says a human should not eat more than 3 or 4 Brazil nuts a day, and that 5 may contain a toxic level. Now, again, after talking with Ellen, there's probably some Brazil nuts out there with no selenium in it. And then there might be some with a lot higher than the levels that they use to determine what they think is safe. But I guess what I'm proposing here is I think if you're on a formulated diet, you're walking on very thin grounds if your birds are eating Brazil nuts, and especially if you're seeing low clutch sizes, some infertility problems, some dermatological feather picking destruction problems, all the things I heard at a conference a couple of days ago for 3 days. And that's basically what they talked about was feather destructive behavior, personality disorders, all these things that we've just talked about could be from selenosis, but no one's talking about that as a possibility.
What about beaks, dry beaks and peely beaks? Do you see that a lot?
Very, very common. And the number one thing everybody says, oh, that's a vitamin A hyperkeratosis, and you got metaplasia of the glands in the mouth. Well, they don't even open the mouth to look at that. So I would say that that's one of the early mistakes we made was trying to say, yeah, vitamin A deficiency is this, and it isn't just that. But that was one. And then the next thing is liver disease. It has flaky beaks and long nails and things like that.
Looking at the Brazil nut, so there's huge variability even in Brazil or the areas that they're grown in. So it depends again on the soil, the conditions of growing, probably the variety of nut itself. All sorts of variables are showing up in the literature. But like you suggest, 2 to 4 nuts for humans meets the total daily selenium requirement of, I think it's like 50 to 55 micrograms per day of this particular nutrient. Now, if we just scale back from, say, 100 kilogram human, that's a 220-pound human. So it's a full-grown man, let's say, to a 1 kilo parrot, which is a big bird. I don't know. Are there any 1 kilo parrots?
2.5 pounds, maybe Kias.
Okay. Well, okay. If you use the exact same dose or the daily requirement for a human for selenium in a Brazil nut for that 1 kilo parrot, that's 1/50th of a nut. And that's just scaling it without even going on a metabolic scaling. So, you know, it doesn't take much for these animals that are such a different body size. It's hard for us to get the concept of meal size for these animals sometimes. And it may very well be that a single nut, even once a month, because that's more than 50, that's more less than 50 days,
Yeah.
could be excess for these animals.